But now, are women's health issues taken seriously enough? Get your calls in now. Elen Wyn, who was one of the stars of Traitors, waited 10 years, which is not abnormal, to be diagnosed with endometriosis, a condition which can cause really painful periods and infertility. Now, during that time, she says she was laughed at by a GP and told that she had a low pain threshold. Now she says that doctors need to treat women's health with greater sensitivity. Take a listen.
I think a narrative needs to be kind of erased here. I think because it's a condition that's associated with female hormones, people tend to link the symptoms with being dramatic. And it's really frustrating to me because, when a girl's on her period, she's just crying all the time. It isn't like that. There's so much stigma around it, and I think that stigma needs to be deleted. It needs to go away.
Now, a report by the Women and Equalities Committee found that medical misogyny is leaving women undiagnosed for many years. Many are then turning to private health care. Is this a bigger issue than many people realise, or do you think actually men's health is equally overlooked? Carol, where do you stand on this?
I have massive sympathy for Ellen. You know, to have this condition at its very worst can make you infertile if it's not spotted in time, which would be tragic for a
And actually,
young
the
woman.
longer you leave it, the
longer that you leave it, the more it because
likelihood.
it spreads throughout your body. So it's a terrible thing. But she said she waited 10 years. Now, you know, I've got to say, one, I've never had this kind of experience that she has. So, I mean, I don't have endometriosis, but I've had lots of other things. So I've never had that experience with a doctor ever in my life. If a GP ever laughed at me, I swear to God, I would actually, not only would I report him or her to the practice, I would report them to the GMC.
I can't tell you how much I believe you when you tell me
I swear to God, because
would you want to have a Carol on your list?
That is a terrible doctor. They have no place in medicine. To laugh at a woman who can't leave the house because she's in agony, who's been in pain for years. And interestingly, she said the minute she went to a female doctor, because the female doctor understood and probably knew about the condition in a way a man wouldn't think. But, you know, I think as well, I think we all have a responsibility too with our own health. You know, I'm a pusher and I learned to be a pusher with doctors with my parents, who were both, you know, who when they got older, both had very serious illnesses. And I realised very early on, if you don't push, if you don't make a noise, if you don't demand attention for the people you don't get it. So I think people also, if they feel though the doctor who is not giving them the attention they need, who is laughing at them, I can't even say it without getting cross, they have to do something about that themselves. I think Ellen's situation is not the norm. I don't believe that is the norm in this health service. I have never come across this with a doctor where a condition has not been
diagnosed. Endometriosis, it does take an average of 10 years to diagnose. It's a very complicated thing to diagnose.
In the same way as sepsis is very, I don't know why, but for a lot of doctors, sepsis,
they miss it.
They miss it.
I think you've kind of hit the nail on the head, actually, Carol. I think you have the kind of personality, and probably I.
And me too, the squeaky wheel.
I think the three of us.
No,
yeah, we're all quite strong, outspoken women, and so if we want something, we're going to make sure that we ask, and also we're going to research. We're going to go on Dr. Google, as a Greek doctor told me off for doing, and you know, all this kind of thing. But I think that everyone's different. Every personality is different. And I think there are many, many women, and particularly I think with women's issues, even just the term women's issues, you know, people go, oh God, can't talk about it, don't want to talk about sex, don't want to talk about gynecological stuff, oh, something doesn't feel right down there, I'm a bit embarrassed. I mean, there was a survey, I think nearly 2/3 of women in the UK think their health issues are not taken seriously. And this was a survey, and I always look at the sample, 10,000 women, over 2/3 thought they weren't.
I read that.
And so I think that there needs to be, therefore, there shouldn't be this onus on us to push. There should be this onus on actually...
Your body, though.
It is our body, but also I think there should be an onus on male and female doctors. I don't know.
Compensate for that.
To compensate, so actually maybe investigate a little bit more, ask a little bit more.
I'm just going to put you both on pause just now because I do need to get to a break. Just pause. You both took a breath at the same time when I got in. Stay with us because I want to hear from you. Do you think that women's health issues are taken seriously? 0207 862 2222 is the number, and we'll see you right after this. We can now speak to Dr. Ellie Cannon, which is great to get a GP's perspective on this. What do you think, Ellie, when it comes to issues like endometriosis? We hear time and time again, it's really hard to diagnose and often missed and dismissed, and women's pain is dismissed. Why is this happening?
Well, I really think actually Carol and Emily sort of hit the nail on the head. Unfortunately, all patients, not just women, still have to be very conscientious, very forceful even. And well, that's whether you're in the NHS or privately, actually. Let's not wrongly assume that private care is any sort of gold standard. But unfortunately, and as you said yourself, endometriosis does take a long time to diagnose. And there's issues all across the patient journey. So there's issues in research for women's health, where it's mostly sort of like done on male subjects, for example. Many health conditions that only affect women are normalized, for example, periods and pregnancy. And both male and female doctors actually sort of trivialize, as we've heard, when a woman has period pain. It's not just male doctors, it can be female doctors as well. Then we have issues whereby even when we have sort of public health adverts and posters and campaigns, they often feature men. So things like women's heart attacks actually get missed because women don't think it's an issue that affects them. So there's sort of like systemic issues across the board with women's health, and it's just not good enough in 2025.
But you touched on it very early on there, but it starts with the funding and the research, doesn't it? Women often get left out of research when it comes to painkillers and other medicines because our cycle is a bit complicated. It leads to statistical variance, and quite frankly, scientists don't like statistical variance. So it's easier to focus on the male population. How do we readdress that? How do we address that fundamental biological difference between men and women?
Well, as you've pointed out, women need to be subjects within research. All different ethnic minorities also need to be properly represented in research. We have big issues with that as well. And things sort of have to fundamentally change. One of the problems with women's health is that periods themselves are normal, pregnancy is normal, menopause is normal. So all of these things are normal life changes. And so when somebody goes to the doctor with an issue surrounding that, you really do have to sort of almost shout loudly to sort of say, actually, for me, this is not normal. And I know women's health charities are very good at encouraging women to do that, but it does take a good relationship with a good doctor sitting in front of you, time, having the opportunity of a face-to-face consultation. So all of these things, unfortunately, do impact a woman's healthcare.
Okay, Dr. Ellie, stay with us, but the one thing I've got so far is what my granny always says: squeaky wheel gets oiled. When you're going to the GP and you have a gut feeling something is wrong, do not let go. Louisa from East Sussex, what's your view on women's health, and is it taken seriously enough in the NHS?
No, it's not. I went to the doctor because I had pains in my breasts and they felt lumpy, and I saw a male doctor. And he said, there's nothing wrong with you. It's muscle strain. You can go home. And I was enraged. I went home and I calmed down. And then I went back and insisted on seeing a female doctor. And I did this. And she examined me. And I was sent to the hospital within 2 weeks. And I was diagnosed with lumps in my breast. And I was given an MRI scan. I had biopsies. And I had breast cancer in both breasts. I had to have surgery on both breasts and surgery under my arms. And after that, when I'd recovered from the surgery, I had to have a daily radiotherapy on both my breasts for a month. And now I'm in remission taking medication. So no, doctors don't take you seriously. They think if you're over 40, you're boring, you're a woman, you're menopausal,
so you've brought in the age element to this as well. First of all, I'm so happy to hear that you're in remission and things are going well. And also you did exactly what Carol and Dr. Ellie are saying. You shouted louder, you demanded to see somebody else and get a second opinion.
That enrages Louisa, that enrages me too, because any woman who goes with lumps in her breast, a doctor can say to you, I think it may not be cancer, but what they should also say, but it's a good idea if you go and get this checked. And that's what that doctor should have done. How dare he dismiss lumps?
Let's just check with Dr. Ellie. Is there a valid reason to send someone home if they come in with potential lumps on their breasts or lumps that they think are abnormal in their breasts? Is there any reason to send them home without a check?
No, and in fact, what's really worrying about that is actually it's more likely in a woman over 40 that you do need to send them to hospital, because obviously as we get older, cancer is a more likely diagnosis. So in fact, because Louisa's over 40, they should have sent her to hospital. And I'm really sorry that happened.
Yeah, I'm really sorry as well, Louisa, but thank you very much for calling up and sharing your story. Susan from Hampshire, I've got a funny feeling we're going to hear quite a lot of these types of stories. Do you have one to tell?
Yes, yeah. I've got endometriosis quite bad, quite severe. And when I was in a lot of pain, I would go to a doctor and explain and say, and he didn't do anything. He just sort of said, "Oh, come back in a month," or it was, it's just totally not seen as serious. And then a few years later, when I decided to have a child, I had fertility treatment, and they said there's something wrong. They did it exploratory, and my endometriosis has stuck my womb on one side to my pelvis with the scar tissue. So no wonder I was in pain. No wonder I couldn't conceive. Then when I had the fertility treatment, they kept saying, "Come back in 6 months. Come back in 6 months." And I was worried because my biological clock was running out. And so I've been left childless, and I think it's the misogyny of the medical profession that did that for me. And
Susan, childless is such a brutal, and that is a real grief for you, so I'm not taking that away. You do feel that way. I want to tell you that you're child free and you can do lots of other things, but that is a real grief for you, and I fully understand, especially with everything that you've gone through, that must cause just extreme pain, not physical but emotional as well. Dr. Ellie, I have a question for you. If you feel like, because this is a story that I hear time and time again anytime we do something on women's health issues, and if you feel you have endometriosis or some sort of a condition along that lines, what can you demand from your GP? What sort of test can you demand that will mean you don't have to wait the 10 years, which means the scar tissue doesn't develop to a point where you become infertile?
So first of all, I would mention the word endometriosis in your first consultation, and take in a pain diary for at least a month just to show when you have the pain. And get yourself all clued up from Endometriosis UK, who have a fantastic website with all the information. So if you want an endometriosis diagnosis, and this is one of the problems, you actually need a procedure called a laparoscopy. In some places now they are starting to do specialised imaging, but that's not all around the country. So you have to bring up the possibility of having a laparoscopy, which is a minor operation, with your doctor and ask for that.
Brilliant. Okay, great. Susan, I'm so sorry to hear your story. Thank you for sharing. Julia from Warwickshire, what's your story? I'm presuming you have one.
Regarding periods, I suffered with quite bad periods from sort of 14 right up until my mid-50s.
When you say bad,
during that time, it would be heavy bleeding, and I'd pass out in work, sort of totally drained, and people would say, "Oh, you look like you need a blood transfusion," and for quite a few years it went on, and there were periodic visits to the doctors and just basically painkillers and getting on with it. And then when I had my son, after that they came back, and then there was scar tissue from that because during birth there was surgery. And then after that, I couldn't conceive again. So we went through several miscarriages, and then fibroids were diagnosed, and one or two of them were quite large, and they impact on your life in terms of you have to plan everything around when your periods are coming. And if they last for, say, 8, 9, 10 days, which sometimes they did and were very heavy, you say you couldn't go on holiday. You'd say, well, I can't go on holiday on those dates. Or if you're going on a special outing, you're always conscious in the back of your mind that you're going to have this very heavy bleeding and these problems. And it is just normalised, and you're made to feel, if you go and keep saying, well, I'm sure this isn't right, you are made to feel quite like a drama queen. And once or twice I got, well, lots of women have these fibroids. Well, I have fibroids too. But, that's really,
it undermines,
I think, now coming to be.
Julie, I completely understand. Those sorts of comments will just undermine what you're going through and make you feel guilty for actually, not liking it and wanting something to change. Julia, you display perfectly what it is like, I suppose, to be a woman. We have to go through this every month for a certain period in our life. And sometimes the pain is apparently equivalent to a heart attack, and yet you're still expected to get into work, do your shift just the same as everybody else and not really complain. And we do sort of all put up with it. So maybe as a collective, we need to stand up and start shouting about it. Julia, thank you so much for sharing your story and explaining that so clearly. Dr. Ellie, thank you very much for all your advice.